Stephen is in the 4th grade. One day his mom took him to school and drove him to school and dropped him off in front of the school, right next to the sidewalk. And Stephen said, "Bye, Mom, have a good day." And his mom said, "Stephen, no kiss goodbye for the day?" And Stephen said, "No, sorry, Mom, no more kisses left. I don't have any kisses to give out." Many of us are like Stephen, at least in his words. We imagine ourselves possessing the economy of love, kisses and everything that symbolizes. We imagine ourselves possessing just so much love. And sometimes we say, "Hey, I've done enough. Let somebody else do the rest, Let somebody else run with the ball." But Jesus comes along and reminds us in this gospel tonight that love is not only a noun, it's not a commodity, love is a verb. If we read in between the lines, I keep saying that to you people. Love is a verb. We do not just possess love. Love is a verb. It's action. Now, of course, Stephen really didn't understand all this. What Stephen was really concerned about is that with all his classmates on the sidewalk, you don't kiss your mommy goodbye, see? Because that's not macho for a 4th grader, see? Jesus answers the scribe tonight in the gospel by quoting, we could actually say, the almost essence of the tradition of the Jewish people. He cited Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. We just heard it by the reader, that proclaims the very essence of Jewish tradition. Listen, Israel. See, it isn't just hear, O Israel. Listen, Israel. Listen, pay attention. This is the greatest. The Lord is our God, the Lord alone, and you shall love the Lord your God with everything you got. Read in between the lines. With every sinew of your body, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul. On this depends everything in the Jewish tradition. Now, some of you have Jewish friends, and if you've gone over to their house, you see a little tube, usually a bronze tube at the entrance of the doorway. That's called a mezuzah. And in that little tube is Deuteronomy chapter 6, what we just read. Hear, O Israel, love the Lord your God. And every time a Jew goes into his house, or even a Gentile, Jew and I, we touch that to remind ourselves of the greatest commandment. The one command tells Israel, whose name symbolizes people who have struggled with God. That's what Israel means. People who have struggled with God. Not very long ago, here in Confessions, elderly woman says, "I feel terribly sorry, Father Joe." And I said, "Well, that's okay. We all feel terribly sorry sometimes." And, "Why do you feel terribly sorry?" She said, "Well, I argued with God." "You argued with God? Wow. And how many times did you argue with God?" She said, "Just once." "Once in 6 months?" "Geez, I argue with God 5,000 times a month." I said, It shows your thinking. It shows your questioning. You're not just gobbling and swallow everything you hear. Now listen again, my brothers and sisters. This business of what Deuteronomy says, hear, O Israel, hear. That's your responsibility. They are not called, the Jews are not called to sacrifice, not called to build temples, not called to pray all day, not called to say the Psalms, and today not called all day to say the rosary, as the rosary is good and all that. But listen, Deuteronomy says, just love and listen. Listen to what God says. There's only one God, and it's our God. No matter how great your intelligence is, no matter what your aspirations are academically, you cannot understand this God. No matter what shiny object you pursue in life, no matter what idols you worship, no matter what philosophies you follow, no matter what you try to attain as far as power and riches go, there is only one thing that is really possible. That's the way you read the scriptures, reading between the lines, because the prophet or whoever wrote this first reading is saying the only thing that matters is God. Genuine purpose of the lives of the Jews. They cannot afford to consecrate themselves to anything else but one God. And additionally, unlike the gods of your neighbors, Deuteronomy is saying, the false gods, the gods of the Roman emperors, there's only one God. And you better love that God. Awesome. Because my brothers and sisters, on this passage is based Christianity. Our brothers and sisters of the Hebrew religion are our ancestors. On this, our Eucharist is based on the Last Supper, on the Passover. And if that isn't enough to love God, what is more difficult is what Jesus adds on to the answer to the people who question him. And Jesus added on then a passage from Leviticus chapter 19. And then you must love your neighbor as yourself. Now, Mark doesn't finish the quotation in the gospel tonight, but everybody in the time of Mark and following Mark knew what the last words of that command were. You love your neighbor as yourself because I am the Lord. It's serious stuff. And so as we come to the end of the church, my brothers and sisters, church year, a couple of weeks left before we begin the beautiful season of Advent, now's the time to take stock in our love relationship with God, and especially Jesus Christ, the sacrament of God. Have you and I strayed a little bit from the essential core of Jesus' message? Do my actions and my very being communicate reverence for God and reverence for my neighbor and the stranger? When they do, like the scribe, we are not far from the kingdom of God. And so how do I flesh out this concept, this abstract concept, this word, love? Oh, so often in life, people, oh, Father Joe, I love you. I says, don't give me that stuff. You don't even know me. You should see me at 6:30 in the morning, huh? You don't know me. You don't know about my temper. You don't know about my moods. You don't know who I am. You don't know what I really, really believe in sometimes. It's a tough word. We throw it around so easily. How do I flesh this out? In the first letter of John, the evangelist, chapter 4, he says, now listen to this. This is tough to swallow. If anyone says, I love God, but hates his brother or sister, he's a liar. That's from John's first letter. Whoever does not love a brother or sister whom he sees cannot love God whom he cannot see. Very dear friend of mine who is no longer with us, I'm sure he's in heaven, in spite of his misconnect. He's a great businessman in Chicago. He hated the Jews. He says, I don't like the Jewish people. I had to work with them. I don't like the Jewish people. I said, my friend, John the Evangelist, in his first letter, says that you can't love God if you don't love your neighbor. And in this particular case, the Jewish people are your neighbor. He said, no, I can love God without loving my neighbor. There's a disconnect there, my brothers and sisters, and sometimes you can't get to first base with people. What is love? A beautiful and concrete example of love was manifested in an article in Time magazine of a couple of months ago, September 24th, 2018. At a construction site just outside of South Bend, Indiana, a group of volunteers are building a house. Working with them is Cleora Taylor, 35-year-old woman, single mother, 4 children. This house will be her house in a few days, the article said. A Habitat for Humanity project. Working in a corner of the site is a 93-year-old carpenter. He's bent over a table saw, cutting lengths of wood for the patio. And over in a little distance is his wife, 91 years old. She's painting finials for the posts on the porch. In his blue and hard hat, the red bandana around his neck, and still working over the table saw, you would not immediately recognize the 39th President of the United States. Jimmy and Rosalind Carter have been building Habitat for Humanity houses for 35 years. These projects have taken them to 14 countries and 21 states. His walk is a little stiff, 93 years old. His back is a little stooped. He doesn't swing a hammer as once he did. He prefers working at the table saw. He can bend over there. Rosalind walks with a cane since she had surgery earlier this year. But they say they'll keep working, doing this as long as they can. And President Carter explains that their work with Habitat for Humanity is an expression, a concrete expression of Christian love. He said, this gives us a chance to put our religious beliefs into practical projects. He says, he continues to talk with his soft country drawl from Georgia. That's a very difficult thing for us wealthy people, he included himself. For us wealthy people to do like we are wealthy, to cross the great barrier between us, the rich, and those who have never had a place to live. The former president says, people ask me what I want to be remembered for, and I usually say peace and human rights. I think it's a basic right of every human being to have a home that's decent in which to raise children, and to have an adequate amount of health care, and to have an adequate amount of education, to take advantage of whatever God gave us as far as talents go. And after he answers the question, he and Rosalind go back to work. One more family, one more house, which is a manifestation of Christian love. About 15 years ago, I took a sabbatical to Africa for 3 months. I was 1 month with my classmate, Tony, big, tall Texan. He's been in Accra. Accra is the capital of Ghana. He's been there for 56 years. Spent a month working with him, getting the feel of his area. Then I spent 2 months working with a bishop in Botswana, Africa, going on liturgies with him to the missions, etc., etc. And one day, Tony, when I was in Accra, Tony took me to this massive mission on the Volta River, biggest river in Accra. It's run by Italian priests from northern Italy. Big school, trade school, elementary school, clinic, big church, football fields, everything, just like a little city. And one day we were having lunch, and at the table were 3 people from Europe, 2 from Germany, and 1 from Austria. And in the course of the discussion, as if I didn't know the answer to my own question, I said, and why did you 3 people come here to work in Accra at this mission? You had to pay your own way. You live in that little house over there, and there's 3 little rooms. Your bed is a wee bit bigger than a cot. You don't get paid. You committed yourself to 3 years. One is an internist, one is an orthopedic, and one is a dentist from Austria. I said, what motivated you to come to do this? And almost unanimously they said, Ich bin ein Christ. You see, you and I would have said, because I am a Christian. There's virtually no word Christian in the German language. It's Christ, just like you would spell Christ, but Christ. And a literal translation of that would be, because I am Christ. Pretty good definition of what love is. I shared this story in my parish years ago, and I was talking to my former dentist. He said, gee, Joe, I'd like to do that sometime. And I said, well, your daughters are married, and everybody's grown up. And I said, why don't you do it now? You're young, you got the money, you got the time. And like the man in another story in the gospel, he walked away. For Jimmy and Rosalind Carter and this German and this Austrian, these 2 Germans and the Austrian, the kingdom of God is not something theoretical. It's not something in the future. It is now. For them and many others, love is not some abstract concept, but a concrete reaching out that embraces every family, every race, every creed, every culture. Love is real in every act of compassionate charity and selfless sacrifice. And when that is present, our humanity resembles God. It is built of respect and honor that we offer to all God's daughters and sons. We got to be reminded once in a while that when you and I stand before our Creator, He's not going to ask us about the accomplishments in life. He's going to ask us perhaps some other questions, but I believe the salient question is, and Jesus is going to quote Matthew 25, what have you done for my sisters and brothers?